Washington's offensive line is ready for a big step forward in 2025.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click the little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new video. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. All that helps us out a lot, as well as if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. It all really helps the show out a lot as we are preparing for the first day of fall camp, as the everydayers are listening to this on Wednesday. So we got so much that we need to get into. We're going to talk about what we're watching for at fall camp on today's show. We're also going to talk about the competition, which is something that Jedd Fisch likes to say a lot, brought it up again today on Tuesday as we're recording this. But the most important thing, Lars, is keeping Demond Williams upright and healthy. And we heard a whole lot about the offensive line. And the more I thought about it, and I thought about the depth compared to last season, something Jedd Fisch mentioned, this group is going to take a big step forward this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, when you think about just the sheer number of bodies, whether it's John Mills, Champ Taulealea, who we talked about yesterday, as freshmen who could step up, Paki Finau is basically like, Paki, that's your job to lose now. They didn't bring anybody in. I was beating that. I'll take it. I was beating that drum hard for one more veteran O-line transfer. And I think we saw it in the spring, and now you can just hear the coaches talking about it. That's why they didn't go and get somebody else in addition to Guerin on the inside. They didn't need to. And there's going to be guys that don't even end up playing that were former 4-stars this year. And so that tells you the depth this year is night and day different from what it was going into last fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And one position where we still have some questions, mainly because he's only played on the other side, is at left tackle with Carver Willis. And it was something where I was really happy to hear not just Jedd Fisch bring it up, not just Michael Switzer bring it up, but Carver himself. They all talked a lot about just the biomechanics and the technical side of what it takes to switch over from the right to the left. And it was something that I had a really nice conversation with Michael Switzer about, where one of the things that he said to me was, yeah, I can't always get into all that technical stuff because I have so many guys to work with and I need to teach more about the blocking. And one person that he brought up, who you've written about over at Huskies Wire, is LaCharles Bentley, who runs AMDG Sports down in Arizona. And it was something that they did a good job advertising over the summer, that all the offensive linemen went down there. Carver said it was a group of about 10 guys that went down and worked out over there for a couple of days. And Michael Switzer gave him a shout out and said it was really cool that they got to work on all the technical stuff and they were working on drills that he had never seen before. And that's one of the interesting coaching things, is that there's always just a different perspective and different drills that you can do to work on the biomechanics and the different things like that. And they all mention it. And one of the other reasons that I thought it was really interesting is it's something where Carver is signed with the NIL agency that AMDG also is a part of. Cody Green, the 2026 5-star offensive tackle, is part of that group as well, as is Paki Finau. So a lot of these high-end offensive linemen are getting training from someone who is widely regarded as one of the best personal offensive line training coaches in the country. And it was cool to see that they have taken that extra step when obviously the coaches aren't able to directly work with these guys over the summer. So being able to not necessarily outsource, but have third parties be able to still help out their groups is a really cool factor in all this as well that I think can't go understated.
No, I mean, it's almost like Roger Rosengarten, his background, but then times 5, times 10, because you have so many other offensive linemen where he came from Valor and had a couple former NFL offensive linemen as his high school coaches. This is now on an annual basis. Like that really can't be replicated. And I mean, when you highlighted that, like the coaches can't be, it's really, that's why the strength staff is so important with Tyler Owens and those guys, because those are the ones around the players more than the coaches are, because the coaches just have that season and a couple times in the offseason. Otherwise, it's basically the strength staff. It is, straight up Tyler Owens and his crew. So anytime you can get them engaged, former NFL offensive linemen, to help some of the young guys and some of the veterans, that's invaluable experience. And I mean, talking about 10 guys, we're trying to figure out who the offensive line is going to be. That might be your answer right there. Like, these are the 10 guys we're going to lean over the next 18 to 24 months. 5 will be starters this year with some backups getting some time. And then you would imagine some of those young guys also that went down there will probably be more 26 oriented, but getting that opportunity now is both good short and long term for that entire unit.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that Jedd Fisch mentioned, where he just said, this is going to be night and day from what it was last year, because we didn't see any of that depth last season. We saw, having to play guard Memelar and Landon Hatchett, who were 8-9 months removed from, Landon's case, 8-9 months removed from a torn ACL, where guard was a little bit closer to a year, but that's still rushing guys back, in a sense. And then you not only have those, like having a guy like Landon to be a stalwart in the middle, but you also have so much competition at those guard spots. You mentioned Paki Finau, and bringing back Garen Hatchett. Zach Henning is another name that you and I have talked about a lot. Plus these true freshmen in John Mills, in Champ Taulealea, who are going to be pushing for spots. And I think you and I both believe are going to play a lot this season, because this coaching staff is not afraid to play them. And if it's, in a rotation, if it's late and blowout games, we're still going to see those guys on the field in all likelihood. So it's great to see them already pushing for those spots and pushing for something we're going to keep talking about a little bit later on in competition. It's just to continue to see those guys forcing their way onto the field. But another position as well where guys, we've seen it from all our everydayers, have some questions is at right tackle, where Drew Azzopardi certainly struggled in his transition from, the FCS levels at San Diego State, or not even FCS, just Group of 5, to the Big Ten. And just, he was relied on so heavily because there were so many other questions along the offensive line. It felt like he could be that stalwart, where Jedd Fisch said Maximus McCree is fully healthy now, and he's pushing for some playing time there. And he talked about Sowane Fasolo being a year older, where I still think that Carver Willis is going to get the majority of reps at left tackle. And I have a feeling that I think John Mills could push Sowane Fasolo as well at that position, where I look across this group, and if it's not one of the more just improved units in the Big Ten, I'm going to be a little shocked, because there's so much extra depth, there's so much extra talent, and it just feels like it's all meshing together really nicely.
Yes, the agenda of Max McCree, here we go. Because I think if Drew ends up struggling, because I don't think he'll struggle in September. I don't think that'll be the issue. It seemed to be more so that October, November pushes where Drew really started to kind of labor a little bit, which makes sense, especially first season.
As the schedule got tougher, yeah.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying. Like in September, I'm not going to be surprised if he makes it through. It's going to be that Michigan, Illinois period where it's like, oh, that might be where you might see some change. And that's why Max McCree is so important to me, because if you end up kicking Carver back over to right for a couple of drives, Max comes in at left, or as we saw last season, you keep Carver at left and Max got some reps at right tackle. It was mostly, I think, pregame. If I'm not mistaken, at Penn State, he was kind of taking some air blocking and doing stuff like that, but he was lining up on the right side instead of on the left, where we had traditionally seen him. And so I think Max being the guy that now back fully healthy with the thumb injury and everything like that. And by the way, been around football for over a year now. Like, again, this is a kid who was working at Dolls and driving the forklift at night. Like, he was working 2 jobs as a normal citizen before he ended up coming back to the college football world. So it took him a little bit, I think, understandably, to get going in that respect. And so I think he's a guy where if he ends up pushing for playing time and, gets significant snaps, I won't be surprised, because we saw the potential there. And then we also saw what happened on the back half of that Iowa game after he went out. Like, there was a massive difference. So it's like, it's not that Max is just a JUCO guy that's a good body. It's like, no, he could legitimately see some snaps this season as long as he stays healthy.
No, absolutely. That's such a big part of this as well. A couple other things I want to mention before we move on. One of the most important things that you and I have been talking about a lot on the show that Jedd Fisch also made sure to bring up today is that these guys have now all been together since January. Something Landon Hatchett mentioned as well, is they have had time to gel and bond as a unit, because we didn't see that last year either, where this time we were still kind of wondering, what's the starting 5 going to look like? Is this guy going to be healthy? Is that guy going to be healthy? Is this guy going to be able to force his way onto the field? There were so many other questions we had. And without those questions now, which is, I think, a really good thing. On top of that, another just huge benefit is Jedd Fisch talked about the strength and conditioning numbers being way up, where he said there are some guys we has to gain weight, some we has to lose, which resulted in a gain of over 700 pounds, is what we were told, from, I think it was January to where they are now. Having all of those gains and that extra physicality in the Big Ten is so important, because, like we said a few minutes ago, it breeds the competition within this unit. And that's something that extends all across this roster. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor, your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I completely feel that. When I go out to the driving range or try to get 9 or even 18 holes in sometimes, there are days where I just need a little bit of an extra boost, and 5 Hour Energy has everything you need. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order Transfusion flavor 5 Hour Energy shots today. Lars, one position you and I have been really curious about in terms of what the competition is going to look like is at wide receiver. And we got a really good, just in-depth look at that today from Jedd Fisch, from Jimmy Doherty, Kevin Cummings. And one of the things that Jedd Fisch said is the majority of this wide receiver rotation is going to come down to 4 players. I think we already know who 3 of them are. And one thing we can get into with that before we even get into who that 4th guy might be is we don't know who the slot receiver is going to be yet. And Jedd Fisch doesn't seem to know either, where Denzel Boston seems locked in as the X role. He's going to play the same position he did last year. But then the other 2 guys, it seems like Omari Evans and Rashid Williams, as we've been saying for a while, are probably going to be the other 2 starters. But as Jedd Fisch said today, we don't seem to know who's going to start in that slot spot just yet, because I think you and I thought it was going to be Rashid Williams, but we knew Omari Evans had the athleticism and the speed and everything you need to succeed in that position. And today Jedd Fisch was like, yeah, we're going to try some different things out. Now that all those guys are healthy, we're going to ramp it up and we're going to see what fits where.
And speaking of a guy who's now healthy, it's Kevin Green Jr. I think that is the X factor in this equation because he is that prototypical slot 5'10" guy who can fill in a way that Giles Jackson role when fully healthy. Again, Giles had a little bit more of the ability to play the outside, whereas I think Kevin is strictly going to be inside. But we saw him last fall. Was it last fall? I think it was last fall because he wasn't here in the spring. Worked really well with Damon, and then he got hurt, I think that second, third week of fall camp, and we just never really saw it come to fruition. But he was Damon's basically go-to option in the slot over the middle. It was always that guy where just always seemed to be open somehow. And I think given that he didn't play at all last season, that's why we're not really talking about him as much, why we haven't really said, hey, watch out for Kevin Green, because we haven't seen it, but we know that the coaching staff is high on him, which is why he came from Arizona to join them.
So that's what I wanted to mention is while I was talking to Kevin Cummings today, Kevin Green was someone he brought up nonstop because it's not just like, as you mentioned, one of the things that really stood out to me was it's not just that he was always open. It was that he was always the first guy looking back for the ball, seeing where Damon was rolling out and finding a way to just get into space and be that security blanket for him. That was really important. But then 2 things that Kevin Cummings noted surrounding Kevin Green today were his ability as a run blocker, which is something he's been very consistent in praising him for. And then his ability as a leader as well, just being one of those guys who the whole room is rallying around. And that's something that really does matter when you're looking for whoever that 4th option is going to be, because he's going to be in competition for that role. Audric Harris is someone who Jedd Fisch said had a fantastic summer. They're really excited about. And then there are 2 other names that we wanted to mention where Raiden Vines-Bright got a big shout out from all of the coaching staff today. And Chris Lawson is someone you and I have been very high on as well.
Yeah. Now, again, when Jedd said the number 4, I was like, ooh, okay, that probably means Chris and Raiden aren't going to see a ton of snaps this season, but I have to imagine they'll get their 4 or 5 games at the very least. We saw Audric burn his redshirt last year. Given the numbers, the one name that we haven't really heard a ton about that I think you also might be intrigued about where he fits into this is Justice Williams, because I have a hard time, imagining him just not getting going a whole nother season without anything, and it's just like, we saw when he was out there, like that's another big body. And again, the kind of sticking point with all these guys, well, we haven't seen it. Like the coaching staff hasn't seen it from them on the field consistently. And that's one thing Jedd has been, no pun intended, consistent about is it's not just showing it in practice, it's showing it week in, week out, day in, day out for like month or two, and then you'll start to see that come into form on Saturdays. It's not just, hey, he had a really good camp, let's now throw everything his way. It's no, you actually have to consistently earn it. So not that Justice hasn't, but we haven't seen it from him on a consistent basis because he hasn't been healthy. So that's another kind of question mark that I have going with all this.
So I hear where you're going surrounding Justice, and as all the Everydayers know, I'm the number one Justice Williams hype man. I don't see it right now. And I don't think it has any knock to do with his talent. I just think this is such a crowded room where I look at he's probably going to be the successor to Denzel in that X spot. I think it's very similar to the Denzel Boston progression, where we saw him have to wait 2 years to even get into this role because Rome Odunze was in front of him. And now it feels like Denzel has just kind of taken over that title, and Justice is the guy that's next in line, where you and I can sit here and say, we've been really impressed with what we've seen from him in practices because he's got all the measurables. He's got the size, speed, route running. He's got everything you need to succeed. We just can't see him on the field yet because there's so much talent in front of him, which is a great problem to have. But moving forward, that's something I'm really intrigued by, because you're right. He's a great talent, and whenever he does get on the field, I feel like he's going to have success. I think we have to wait one more year for that.
I can see that. And I think that's what makes Omari so intriguing, is we really kind of had him penciled in as the guy opposite of Denzel. And now to imagine him with that speed in the slot, I look at Rashid. Rashid could play that outside spot. And again, Rashid was healthier more so than Justice was last season. So that's why Rashid would be in that spot. And then I think, Kevin Green kind of factors in where he obviously does. But it does allow for some flexibility. That's what I'm curious to see. We always hear Jedd talk about numbers. Like you and I both know this as well as anybody, where Jedd says, stats this, numbers that. And then you get to game day or you play it out, and it's like, that wasn't exactly what you said. And so I'm curious how much flexibility is going to be in that. Because historically we have seen Jedd really focus on two guys and then two others kind of check in below them. It's really like, you got your top two guys and then a middle guy and then like a 30 catch guy, a 20 catch guy. There isn't really that spread out dynamic. And so I'm curious, how does the interchangeability of Rashid and Omari factor into this? Because Kevin, slot, Denzel, his own position. It's really those two guys plus then Audric and, the other guys that we've been mentioning.
So I like everything you're saying there. I just want to make sure we talk about one other position before we move on here, and that's linebacker. I look at this linebacker unit, and it was really great getting to talk to a couple different guys, Devin Bryant, Budalukta, Brian Odom. We got to talk to so many different just players and coaches surrounding that position group. And one thing that I took away from it is there is such a similar amount of talent there that it's a great problem to have, but we don't know what that's going to look like. And maybe Xe'ree Alexander and Jacob Manu still working their way back from torn ACLs, helps that problem in the short term, and it all works itself out. But one thing that really stood out to me, and I looked at our good buddy Alex Katzen, we were both like, whoa, when we heard it, was Xe'ree Alexander is up to 245 pounds. And that's the kind of note where, okay, if he plays more outside linebacker, that's, going to be really nice, and it could help you out with Russell Davis going down for the year. And it was something where Brian Odom mentioned he was kind of a 50-50 split in terms of playing Mike versus walking down and playing outside linebacker during spring practice. And I'm curious to see if that continues, because that's kind of a you can kill two birds with one stone sort of thing and just give you more depth at several positions. But if Xe'ree works his way back, he can fill that role as well. Devin Bryant is someone we can't discount in this discussion because he worked so well during spring practice. And you also have someone who seems to be written in pen at this point as your starting Mike in Budalukta. So there is so much talent to go around that position. I'm just curious to see what that competition is going to look like and how these injured guys, if they're able to push their way onto the field early in fall camp, might just change this equation.
Yeah, I swear we threw that out there when we talked about the Russell Davis going down, was X being able to play outside linebacker. And I think that is something that, again, this is why we talked about it and you wrote about it on Huskies, where the Ryan Walters scheme allows you to do so many different things. Like, that's why you look and think, why'd you bring 3 transfer linebackers in with all the guys you have, behind them? It's like, who says they're all going to, they can all be on the same field? They can all not be on the same field. Like, it's so interchangeable that X being, potentially opposite of Zach Durfee, and then you have Deshaun Lynch somewhere in there. Like, there's so many different things you can do. Like, that's what's so intriguing about what we're going to be looking at fall camp.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to like, and there's just There is so much more depth on this roster. That's one of the reasons that, we made our record predictions earlier this week. We were at, 9-3 and 10-2 respectively, because there is so much extra depth and talent on this roster. And there really is a lot to be excited about. And Lars, we just got to get into some of these guys that we're going to be keeping a very close eye on. So I want to start with Rylon Dillard-Allen. This is a guy who we've been talking about for a long time, wound up as the second highest rated member of Washington's 2025 class, was someone we were talking about for a while, even before he committed to Washington, while he was still committed to Arizona State, because we knew how high Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff, this personnel department with Matt Doherty and all of them, how high they were on Rylon as a player. And I got a chance to sit down with Ryan Walters, with Mikel Esteen, and there was one very essential theme across all of them. Rylon Dillard-Allen is going to play a lot this year. Like, that was something where I asked Mikel Esteen about it, and I said, what have you learned about this kid? Like, we know he's got the athleticism. We know he's got, like, all the talent in the world. And he's just like, yeah, he's put on weight, and he's someone who needs to play this year, is I'm quoting him there. So that was a really exciting thought to me, because I look at the top three safeties in this room. We know who they are. We know it's Mikel. We know it's CJ Christian, and we know it's Alex McLaughlin. That fourth safety, there is going to be a competition. It will be either Rylon or Vincent Holmes or Paul Menke, now that Raheem Wright is done for the year as well. So he's someone who I think can force his way onto the field. And Ryan Walters said as much as well. One of the things he said to me was, I'm not afraid to play true freshman. Everyone knows what my track record is on that. Dylan Tiedemann was a freshman All-American for him at Purdue, who was super productive during his time there. And one of the first things that Walters highlighted during my discussion with him, which was largely scheme-based, our insiders have full access to that, by the way. You can check that out down in the description below, by the way. You get a free 2-week trial, and then it's $4.99 a month after that. But I asked Ryan Walters how having these corners on the outside just frees everything up. And he said, yeah, but one thing that you can't discount in all this is whoever's playing single high needs to be able to put a ceiling on this defense and go sideline to sideline and just really help take everything away over the top. And I said, like, you're talking about Rylon Dillard-Allen, right? Like, he's someone who can do that. And he said, yeah, like, this is a guy with just such rare traits who can do so many different things to help us out over the top of the defense. And just the more I think about it, the more I think he's going to be one of those guys that plays in every game this year on defense as well as special teams.
Yeah, I was going to say, remind me of the conversation I had. Like, I know I'm going to play this season, special teams, and we'll see how much I can get on the field on defense. And it's like, now by the end of spring camp, no, he's going to play. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how much. And I fully agree with you that I'll co-sign on that right now. I would be surprised if Rylon, I think it's going to actually be more tailored towards defense. I think obviously he'll help out on special teams, but just the way his instincts are. I mean, going back to the time when we were covering his recruitment, it was like this was a must-get for a reason. Like, when we talk about recruits that were must-get, this is why, because now you fast forward basically a year, and it's like, hey, Rylon might be not a starter, but a guy who can legitimately factor into this competition and, obviously playing every game. And I think it's just, there's not really a guy that he truly reminds me of, because, again, you look at both the size and physicality. There's a couple that can come to mind, but I think for me, I want to see what Ryan Walters can do with him, because him and Taylor Mays combined, like, Rylon could be a freshman All-American in the same way that Decker DeGraaf was last season. Like, I truly believe that. Again, it'll be hard because of the talent above him, and you're talking about CJ Christian, Alex McLaughlin, all the veterans above him. But, man, like, CJ is right there. Not CJ. Rylon Dillard-Allen is right there in terms of just, being able to crack through that, I think, honestly.
So let's talk about another guy who has that freshman All-American potential. That's Rahshawn Clark, where you can look across this defense, and it's something where I was really intrigued by it, and something you and I have discussed a little bit on and off air, where I think Rahshawn Clark is going to get targeted a lot early in the season, because you look on the outside, and Jedd Fisch talked about it today, saying he's got multiple guys he believes are top 100 NFL draft level talents. Tacario Davis is one of those guys. And Ephesians Prasak, if he has a big year, he can be in that discussion as well because of his frame and size and ball skills and different things like that. He can be in that discussion as well. And opposing offenses, coaching staffs, quarterbacks, they're going to see that, and they're going to say, well, let's attack this redshirt freshman in the slot. And with what kind of athleticism and just maturity he brings to the table already as a redshirt freshman, I believe we're going to see Rahshawn Clark continue to thrive the way he did in spring camp. And I think that's going to carry over into the season. And it's something where, I'm sure the everydayers are like, well, hey, you've talked about this guy a lot. Like there's a lot going on there. A lot of other people that you can talk about. And it's yes, but this guy in the slot is such an important part of this defense where the cogs in this defense, they all need to work in perfect sync. And having to lock down man coverage corners on the outside is so important. But having a guy in the slot who can do so many different things, and it's not just drop back in coverage and create turnovers and do all the things that John Richardson has emphasized in that department, but someone who can also be a willing and able tackler to come down and blitz at different points in time or to fill holes and run support and just, again, tackle and force running backs and quarterbacks who are carrying the football to turn back upfield into the defensive line. Rahshawn Clark can do all of those things as well. And as I just continue to watch what he can bring to the table this fall, those are all things that I think can make him a guy who is probably the biggest riser in terms of this whole team.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys who I can think of in terms of the biggest risers overall. But yeah, Rahshawn has got to be, top 5 in that list for sure. And I think definitely a guy that punches above his weight, punches above his size, put it that way. Because again, he's not appreciating or Takario in terms of size, but sure plays like it, kind of like Rylon in a way. Like they both play above their weight. The thing that I'm going to be intrigued though is just, knowing Rahshawn's got that nickel spot kind of taken out, like what happens to Dyson? We would talk about the competition. Like there's so many other veteran guys in this room. I'm just curious, how do they end up making an impact? Because I think without a question, Rahshawn's got the nickel spot to lose. And I am with you in terms of him getting targeted. I have flashbacks to Elijah Molden. I'm like, teams never really tried to test him as much as they tried to test Keith Taylor. Like, it seemed more so like go test, and this is no shot at the Ephesians, but like if Rahshawn's having success, if Takario's locking guys down, you're not going to keep testing guys that are having success locking your receivers down. It's going to be, well, let's go test the other guy and see if he, has made improvements or not. And by the way, that usually results in sacks or pressures or throwaways, because if we're talking about, we'll see if you can get to your third, fourth read, UW's got the horses now to get after the quarterback, unlike last year.
Right, absolutely. But that's kind of my point is I think that especially early on where you talk about we need to see Ephesians make those improvements after, it's something we've talked about a lot where he was playing down the stretch with an injury a little bit that did require a surgery that kept him out for all of spring practice. But at the same point, though, that's still a guy who is coming into his senior year with a lot of acumen. He's a preseason All Big Ten player, as is Takario Davis. Do those things mean anything when you step on the field? No. But at the same point in time, there's also just a level of game planning that goes into it, right? Where if you're an opposing offensive coordinator, you're going to say that guy number 8, how many games has he started? Oh, yeah, he's got a lot of experience. Number 7, how many games has he started? Oh, there's a lot of experience there too. 20 in the slot? Oh, he doesn't have any starts under his belt. He's played in 1 game. Like those are things that are going to be looked at early on. And, I think we said it on yesterday's show. By the middle of October, maybe that's not going to be the plan anymore. But early on, we're going to see a lot of that. And that's something that I'm curious to see how this coaching staff might prepare him for it in fall camp. Are we going to see, Demond make a point to target whoever's in the slot a lot, to try to pick on Rahshawn a decent amount because we know that that's what opposing quarterbacks might want to do and opposing coaching staffs might want to do. So that's something I want to keep an eye on. But one more thing that you and I wanted to get to before we get out of here is we wanted to talk about the tight end group, because this is something where Jedd Fisch had said that Quentin Moore is about 75% healthy from a knee injury. He mentioned during today's press conference that it wasn't because of the severity of the injury last year, but it's because of a couple of setbacks that he might have had. I got to spend a lot of time talking with Decker DeGraaf today. And it was really interesting because one of the questions that I asked him was, even though he's a sophomore, he's had to take on a pretty significant leadership role in that room. So I'm really curious to see how his role might continue to improve, because one of the things with Quentin Moore that's, made him such a mainstay on this team for a long time is he's an elite run blocker. And that's something that when we talked to Decker in the spring, that was the biggest point of emphasis for him, was improving against the run. And it feels like one of the things that he told me that I really appreciated and thought was really interesting was that he not only is continuing to work on that, but he's also been continuing to try and master the playbook was what he told me. And he said having to take on that leadership role and teach not only, the true freshmen in the room like Austin Simmons and Baron Naone, but a transfer in Cade Eldridge, who's, still coming in and getting acclimated to things. Having to teach all those guys the playbook and help them out has helped him move forward and master that playbook even more.
Well, yeah, especially Cade, because tight end isn't in the USC playbook. Like that.
That's
a real, well,
it's a non-existent position.
Which is so funny because Mark Bowman. Anyway, long story short, I think this has basically become Decker's room, and that's no shot at Q. I just think when you think Washington tight end 2025, it's just Decker DeGraaf, and then everybody else. It's like Decker DeGraaf and friends, but Q is still an important role in that. And I think being the run blocker that he is, that frees up Decker to be even more the split out guy or the pass catching wide tight end. But I'm really curious though, like you mentioned with Austin Simmons and Baron Naone. Those are two guys who I do think will get a lot of playing time this season, just because when you look at the depth of the room, Charlie Kroll coming off the ACL. There's the thing with the reason why I said is Austin Simmons, his position versatility, as we talked about in the program. There's a couple of different things you can do with him that, it's probably more so in the non-comp than actual conference play. But there's so much potential there. I'm curious to see how do they sprinkle in the freshmen because, you don't have a ton of targets there, but you want to get a little creative, a little bit.
So I agree with you in that sense, but I look at this room and you want to give Quentin Moore the playing time because it is his final season of eligibility. You want Decker to continue getting as many reps as possible there to take that step forward. We know that's one of the reasons that Cade Eldridge left USC, to get more reps. And I think that's something where, we're going to see a little bit more of that. Obviously, you mentioned Charlie Kroll, Ryan Otten, the guys who we want to see them get healthy and see what it might factor in there. And if they are, that's kind of why I'm a little bit more shaky where I thought Baron Naone was going to be among this group that might burn their red shirts. I'm not so sure about that anymore. And it's not, to a lack of talent to either of those guys. It's just there are so many more experienced bodies ahead of them. And I think Cade is the one who might really do it there because having a guy like that who, no, he doesn't have a ton of experience from his time at USC, but just being a little bit further along in terms of development, being here in January and being able to go through spring practice is something that at the end of the day might just help him win out in terms of the depth chart sort of stuff because they're all really talented guys, but Quentin Moore is going to graduate after the year. There's going to be so many more opportunities. And I think we see that in terms of the recruiting as well, where right now the only commit is 3-star Sam Villadal. We're only taking him just kind of shows that, we're really excited about the long-term future of this position and who is already in the room right now. So we can just take a developmental guy and then worry about taking more higher end targets in 2027 and beyond because that room is so stacked right now. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout fall camp. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.